maybe finally things are moving. There may have been things that we've been worrying about for ages and ages, and we may get a resolution. It could all happen. After all, there is today a sextile between Jupiter and Uranus. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and it is Tuesday, July the 21st, 2026. In this video, I will start off by looking at what is going on today astrologically. I will be talking about Jupiter sextile Uranus and everything else going on today, and I will be relating this to the 12 signs, and I will be finishing this video with an I Ching reading. So let's start off with the astrological picture for today. So here is a chart set for today, Tuesday, July the 21st, set for noon, New York time. And at noon, New York time, the moon is in Scorpio. You can see that it is at 1 degree 15 Scorpio. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So the moon moves into Scorpio at, I make it 2:34 p.m. London time. So this afternoon, the moon moves into Scorpio. And, oh, by the way, talking about London, of course, Britain has a new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. I'm not going to be talking about Andy Burnham in this video, but I'm going to try to do a special video. I'll probably put it out Tuesday morning, relating to Andy Burnham and the time he became Prime Minister. But yes, so London time, 2:34 p.m. Today, Tuesday, the moon moves into Scorpio. So that means if you're in the Americas, then in the Americas, the moon will move into Scorpio this morning. And so that is certainly a change, but the moon stays in the Via Combusta. So, the Via Combusta is, of course, between 15 degrees Libra and 15 degrees Scorpio. And, of course, the Via Combusta is a time when things can happen, when we can't expect things to be, completely stable. And by and large, the Scorpio side of a Via Combusta is more difficult than the Libra side. And so, the moon moving into Scorpio, well, the moon is fallen in Scorpio, and in theory at least, the point where it's at its maximum fall is 3 degrees Scorpio. I know that 3 degrees Scorpio using the Vedic zodiac is also the point of maximum fall. I mean, in Vedic astrology, the fall and the power of being exalted or fall is a sort of something quite continuous. As you get closer and closer, as the moon gets closer and closer to 3 degrees Scorpio, it becomes more and more debilitated. So yeah, that is a Vedic approach. I don't know if that's quite an approach that's used in the West, but I think it kind of makes sense. And so yeah, the moon beginning of Scorpio is potentially problematic, and things can happen, and some of us might be feeling sorry for ourselves, especially if the moon is opposition Chiron, and that is what we've got now. So moon in Scorpio, opposition Chiron in Taurus, and you kind of immediately think of Chiron in terms of the wounded healer, and the moon in Scorpio can sometimes feel a bit wounded. Not necessarily if you've got moon in Scorpio in your own horoscope, but it can be about moon in Scorpio in general. Because if you've got moon in Scorpio in your own horoscope, you've got your whole lifetime to get used to it and get familiar with moon in Scorpio and find out how it works and harness it in a beneficial way. But in general, when the moon is in Scorpio, opposition Chiron, that might mean. But a lot of us are feeling sorry for ourselves. There might be things which are just very hard to get rid of. Moon in Scorpio, opposition Chiron in Taurus in fixed signs. And so there could be wounds which we just hold on to. The past just won't go away. Although Chiron can also be the maverick, and it wants to break free and it wants to do things differently. And so maybe with Moon opposition Chiron, we might feel that we have to respond to our own concerns, our own worries, and yes, our own wounds by taking action and by doing something that is really completely unexpected and disturbing. Yeah, that can be what Chiron likes to do. It likes to disturb. Now, you could say that today, particularly late in the day, we've got a Grand Cross, and the Grand Cross involves Moon, Chiron, Jupiter, and Pluto. And so, yesterday I talked about the Jupiter-Pluto opposition. So Jupiter was exactly opposition yesterday, Monday. But arguably, it's today that Jupiter-Pluto opposition really comes into being, because the Moon is involved with it. The Moon is square Jupiter, square Pluto. And so this is really quite intense. So, I talked about Jupiter-Pluto opposition, and I said that Jupiter-Pluto opposition could be about wanting things to be better, not being satisfied with second best, wanting perhaps to push things as far as possible. But then you throw Moon in Scorpio into the equation, and yeah, it does become intense. There are things that we really, really want to do, and we are not going to let go. Okay, it might not be us, it might be other people, it might just be the world we're living in. And so, once people start on something, there might be no end of it, because they're always looking for things to be better. And that quest might be impossible, or indeed it might be impossible for everyone to be happy. Maybe some people can seize the advantage, but perhaps they want to use the energy of this Jupiter-Pluto opposition to have everything. It's not enough to have half. It's not enough to share. We want it all. And underlying all of this, there might well be a wound, because there is a Grand Cross, Moon opposition Chiron, Jupiter, Pluto. And so why are people behaving in such a way, being so intense, really feeling they need to get hold of everything? Perhaps because they're trying to make up for something. It is a wound represented by Chiron in Taurus. And talking about Chiron in Taurus, we also have Mars making a semi-square to Chiron. So there's Mars, and it's making a 45-degree aspect to Chiron. There will be a point in the day where the Moon is making a sesquiquadrate to Mars as well. So you could say that Mars, Moon, Chiron will at some stage be coming together. So, yeah, talking about the past, Mars semi-square Chiron, we feel perhaps upset about what has happened in the past, and we kind of want to do something about it. And Chiron, if Chiron is a maverick, is a disruptive energy. It's quite a rebellious energy. Then that might be how Mars semi-square Chiron works. We feel that we just have to make our influence felt, and we don't care about what happens. We don't care about maybe how much damage we cause, because we've got a wound. We need to talk about it, and we need perhaps to almost avenge it, and make sure that we change everything. So yeah, I think that Mars semi-square Chiron could actually be quite a disruptive energy. Now, the Moon, Moon at noon New York time is at 1 degree Scorpio, just before the moon moved into Scorpio, there was a first quarter moon. So we had a first quarter moon at 28 degrees. So the moon was at 28 degrees Libra, or will be at 28 degrees Libra, and the sun will be at 28 degrees Cancer. So that is the first quarter moon. And so it's always good to look at the lunation cycle and where we are on the lunation cycle. So about a week ago we had a new moon in Cancer, and now the moon has moved on. And so when you've got a first quarter moon, this means that the lunation cycle has developed. I mean, I think first quarter moons tend to be quite fortunate, if anything. At least the moon is getting bigger, and we're in the waxing stage of the lunar cycle. So, for example, Andy Burnham becoming Prime Minister, British Prime Minister, after the new moon, while the moon is waxing, that in itself is relatively fortunate. I mean, there are other things to consider with Andy Burnham becoming Prime Minister, as I'll be discussing in a video I'm going to put out sometime in the next 24 hours or so. There are other things, like the fact he's becoming Prime Minister, but while Mercury is retrograde. But certainly having a first quarter moon it's quite a dynamic time. It's action orientated. Something began with the new moon. We pondered the new moon, and now it's time to think, well, what are we going to do now? What must be done now? And so, the sun in Cancer, okay, that's quite an emotional placement. A sun in Cancer. The sun was in a water sign at the time of the new moon. We had a new moon in a water sign, but the moon moves on to late Libra, and so perhaps that action has to take a sort of a Libran quality. That might be about other people, having to involve other people in what we're doing. Libra is being a sociable sign. So that may be one way in which a first quarter moon works. But in general, first quarter moon, you've had a week to think about the new moon, a week to think about the new lunar cycle, and now is the time to actually decide what exactly you are going to do. Not just decide, you've actually got to do something. Now we then have this sextile between Jupiter and Uranus, and I will talk about the Jupiter-Uranus sextile after I have just looked at the chart set for today's chart set for Sydney, Australia, and when I've looked at the heliocentric chart. So hold on for that. And so here is the positions of the planets set for Sydney, Australia. So moon, Sydney, Australia today, Tuesday, the moon is at 24 degrees Libra. So what that's telling you, if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, is but for the most of the day, the moon is not going to be in Scorpio. The moon will not go into Scorpio until really right at the end of the day, almost into Monday. And so perhaps the main theme is just this first quarter moon, as I've just been describing. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, think about this first quarter moon. What's happened over the last week, and what today are you going to do? And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. So the sun is the Earth is at 28 degrees Capricorn, getting ready to move into Aquarius. Remember, the Earth heliocentrically is always exactly opposition where the sun is. So the sun is at 28 degrees Cancer. So the Earth in a heliocentric chart is going to be at 28 degrees Capricorn. And the sun is still, or rather the Earth is still making a square to Chiron. So, there is a Chiron feel to today in general. We knew that because the moon in Scorpio is starting to make an opposition to Chiron. We have Mars semi-square Chiron. And yes, heliocentrically, the Earth is just finished making a square to Chiron. So there is a general feeling that perhaps we have been wounded, but things in the past haven't been as good as they should have been, that there just may be this feeling of resentment or perhaps injustice if we're talking about how other people are being treated. And it might be that some of us just want to brood about this and feel sorry for ourselves, but Chiron can be about action. Chiron can be the rebel, so that's an alternative way in which Chiron can work. And heliocentrically, Venus is moving into Sagittarius, so Venus is starting to make an opposition to Uranus, and a trine to Neptune. So heliocentric Venus picking up on this Uranus-Neptune sextile. So that might say something about other people. It may say something about art. I mean, Venus is a planet of art, and so Venus opposition Uranus may be an opportunity to do something which is unusual. In fact, Venus trine Neptune opposition Uranus may mean, from an artistic point of view, we're able to sort of tune into something which is beyond ourselves, which is of a fairly cosmic nature. And then we have the sextile between Jupiter and Uranus. So this sextile is generally seen as being something quite fortunate. I mean, why not? I mean, at least from a theoretical perspective. I mean, Jupiter is, the great benefic, and it's often seen as a lucky planet. And so if it's sextile Uranus, that might mean that just something happens, something unexpected happens that may be lucky. So it just is like a piece of luck that just comes from nowhere. And that's why I called this video, I said, thank God, because it is about perhaps a feeling of relief that things are suddenly working out. And Reinhold Ebertin, in his combination of stellar influences, he talks about Jupiter square Uranus, because the way the combination of stellar influences works is he just goes through all the planetary pairs and the ascendant and the midheaven and the node, and he says about Jupiter Uranus, he has a paragraph in his description, nota bene. He says, right at the end, he says, it is often very difficult to assess the nature of Jupiter-Uranus constellations. They indicate, in most cases, inner tensions or strains, which are then suddenly released. So, hence, thank God, you can see that. At one time, the author named this configuration the thank the Lord position, because people having such a configuration have repeatedly exclaimed the words thank the Lord after the release of a tension or strain from which they were suffering. So Ebertin does say, though, at one time the author named this configuration the thank the Lord position. Now, does this indicate that Ebertin had a change of mind? I mean, that's something that we do need to consider, and I will be considering. But you can certainly see this idea of release and sort of relief. And so in terms of how you negotiate today, I think you should be looking for some kind of resolution. If you think that there's been a lot of stress going on, that things have been really building up, maybe Jupiter sextile Uranus will just give you the opportunity, will perhaps give you an understanding that actually things are okay, and it just may be something that just comes to you as just in a moment, in a single moment. Yeah, it's not so bad, and it could well be about a piece of luck. And of course, this Jupiter sextile Uranus, it is part of a sort of wider configuration. So, there is Jupiter and there is Uranus and there's Pluto. So, we've had this Jupiter-Pluto opposition yesterday. And it might well be that Uranus is kind of moderating the Jupiter-Pluto opposition. So Jupiter-Pluto opposition does represent the stress. We have really heavy expectations for ourselves. There's so much we want to do, so much we want to achieve, but can we do it? I mean, it's tough. It's hard work. And maybe Uranus making the trine to Pluto, sextile to Jupiter, perhaps gives us what we're looking for. And rather than it all just being about hard work and pushing ourselves to the limit, there just may be a sudden moment where it all comes together. So this description of Jupiter-Uranus is quite theoretical, and I think it's okay to be theoretical about it, especially on a personal level. Us as individuals, how are we going to interpret this Jupiter sextile Uranus? And maybe we have a choice. We can take the planets as they are, be aware that there's this Jupiter sextile Uranus, and just be looking for that Jupiter sextile Uranus moment, something that is fortunate, something that does work for us. But we can look at particular events which took place when Jupiter was sextile Uranus, and what is formed. There are two things that got formed when Jupiter was sextile Uranus. So here, for example, is the formation. I don't know whether this is a regiment. This is I think it's a section of the Ukrainian army. It's called the 14th Rocket Artillery, and the 14th Rocket Artillery. I became aware of it because it was formed in Sumy in northern Ukraine, and there was an incident where there was an award ceremony for the 14th Rocket Artillery in Sumy, and it got attacked by the Russians, and a lot of people were killed. And I was looking at the 14th Rocket Artillery, and I wanted to know when it was formed. And the 14th Rocket Artillery was formed on May the 14th, 2008. I mean, obviously, I don't know what time. And at the time of its formation, Jupiter was at 22 degrees Capricorn and Uranus was at 21 degrees Pisces. So there was a Jupiter-Uranus sextile. And so when you think about Uranus and Jupiter, you kind of think about rockets and artillery. And so forming something connected with rockets and artillery, in this case the 14th Rocket Artillery, does kind of fit the astrological symbolism. There was also a moon opposition Uranus at the time, on the day of its formation. Another thing which got formed at the time of the Jupiter-Uranus sextile in Germany was the AfD. The AfD is this sort of right-wing party in Germany, which gets a lot of press. I believe it's currently, in terms of opinion polls, is the most popular party in Germany, much to the distress of many in Europe. But it was formed in a place called Oberösel. I think that's quite close to Frankfurt, and at the time of its formation, there was a Jupiter sextile Uranus. So Jupiter sextile Uranus, something changing, something quite sudden happening. Suddenly, this new political organization emerges, and so is it a fortunate time to start something with Jupiter sextile Uranus? I don't know. I mean, we saw with the 14th Rocket Artillery, but they did. I mean, they did take a lot of casualties when the Russians attacked their award ceremony. Then you've got the AfD. So far, the AfD has been a very successful organisation, but quite a dramatic organisation in terms of the impact it's had on German politics. Then there is the hydrogen bomb. So this is a chart of the first hydrogen bomb on October the 31st, 1952, and Jupiter, it was at 16 degrees 58 Taurus, Uranus at 1831 Cancer. So a Jupiter-Uranus sextile, well, that kind of fits a hydrogen bomb. I mean, Uranus is very explosive, and Jupiter is, sort of bringing things together. It's a fortunate planet, but a dramatic planet as well. It really is quite sort of expansive and explosive. And, if we're talking about explosives, explosions, well, we can think about acts of terrorism, perhaps acts of government terrorism. For example, the Rainbow Warrior. The Rainbow Warrior was a ship operated by Greenpeace, and there's a nuclear link here as well, because the Greenpeace was, I believe, trying to disrupt a French nuclear test. It was trying to sort of, with this Rainbow Warrior, going into the exclusion zone of the test zone of the test site. And in Auckland Harbour, the Rainbow Warrior was blown up by French intelligence or by French agents, and so here is the chart for the explosion, and there we have a sextile between Jupiter and Uranus. Jupiter at 15 degrees Aquarius, Uranus at 14 degrees 43 Sagittarius. So it was actually quite a close Jupiter-Uranus sextile. So we're getting a feeling here that, particularly with reference to to the hydrogen bomb as well, that Jupiter sextile Uranus could be just sort of explosive. Jupiter makes things bigger, makes Uranus bigger, and this that you had the hydrogen bomb, and you had this act of government terrorism. The government didn't know when to stop, and I think the French government were rumbled pretty much immediately. And then we had a mass shooting, a very significant mass shooting taking place in Texas on August the 1st, 1966. And I think that this took place at a university in Texas. Someone sort of got onto a tower and started shooting students. And, this event, I think, may have inspired a lot of sort of copycat killings, and it was certainly something really, really major. This shooting on August the 1st, 1966, and Jupiter was sextile Uranus. So when you think about Jupiter-Uranus, I think that theoretically you can see that it is quite positive. And perhaps in our own individual lives, it is positive. It's about luck. I mean, it has to be about luck. Things suddenly happening, a relief from tension. But if you actually look at events that took place when Jupiter was sextile Uranus, some of them, are quite explosive. They can be unfortunate, can be tragic. Because you could say Jupiter sextile Uranus, Jupiter just gives that Uranus a boost, and it allows Uranus to go even further than it would have been able to, without that influence. So Jupiter-Uranus can potentially, I'm afraid, be quite a dangerous influence. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs, and these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, July the 21st, 2026. Aries, there is a question of what is needed. How far do you need to go in order to get the results you are looking for? I think that you'd like to believe that it was all going to be fairly straightforward. I mean, you had the ideas, you had the energy, and perhaps you had a modicum of support, and that was enough. And it may be starting to occur to you that things may be slightly more complicated than you had realized, that you're going to have to take things more seriously, and perhaps you can't entirely rely on existing resources. Those resources might be human resources, for example. Can you entirely rely on other people to get you through, to give you the support you need? And the answer may be no, or sort of maybe. Maybe yes, perhaps you can rely on other people, but you're not sure. And as a result, Aries, you might feel in the end that you have to kind of take things further, and in particular, be quite self-reliant. I mean, sure, it's nice if people are helpful. It's nice if you get a few lucky breaks, and there are, I believe, lucky breaks to be had. But you have to be ready to push everything you've got into the achievement of your goals, whatever those goals might be. And at the same time, you've got an active imagination. There are lots of things that you are thinking about. Lots of possibilities, but it's just a question of can you see it through? And so that seems to be a broad issue today, Aries. Just feeling that in spite of your hopes for the future, in spite of your optimism, that just something else may be required. And in the end, you might find that things are just more complicated than expected, and you perhaps have to think about what resources do you have to bring to play. We've all got a lot of resources. Perhaps it's our strength, our imagination, our charisma, and so on. And very often we don't really want to bring all our resources out into the open. It just might be too much of a difficulty. It might just be too much like hard work. But I think as the day gets going, it just becomes clear that a minimal effort is just not enough. It might just be a question of bringing everything together, and at the same time being quite intense about it. Again, you don't want to be intense. You'd kind of like to be free and open, but it just may not be possible. And from an astrological point of view, one thing happening over the course of a day is the moon moving from Libra to Scorpio, and this movement takes place this afternoon in Europe and Africa, but it will takes place in the morning in the Americas. And when the moon does move into Scorpio, that's perhaps a time of realization, when you start to see that things might be happening which you maybe thought you could control, but they do have a will of their own. And if you just sort of do nothing and sort of let things just go their merry way, then things might not be great, and you might find that you just don't know what to do next. And so that says something about your overall stance today. But we do have a sextile aspect between Jupiter and Uranus, and I think there's no reason not to regard the Jupiter sextile Uranus aspect as being pretty fortunate. Ebertin, after all, suggested it might be the thank the Lord aspect. So there are opportunities available. It is possible to be lucky today. Particularly with Jupiter in Leo, Jupiter in a fire sign, Jupiter in a sign that is very sort of Aries friendly, and making a sextile to Uranus. It could be that in order to sort of maximize your luck, you just have to make a small shift. You're kind of almost there, but you just have to move the centre of your operations. Maybe we're talking about to a different place, or you have to sort of bring in a new set of ideas. And so once you bring in these new ideas, and it's not entirely easy, you have to put in that effort, then you quickly start to see some results. These results are not necessarily expected. I mean, we've got the moon in the Via Combuster. When you've got the moon in the Via Combuster, yeah, sure, things are perhaps unstable and unpredictable. But Jupiter sextile Uranus is an unstable and unpredictable element as well. And as I said in the introduction, it's not always fortunate. There are some quite sort of dramatic and negative events that have taken place in the past while Jupiter is sextile Uranus. But we're talking about you as an individual, and I think that you as an individual, by embracing the uncertainty of the times in which we are living, you may be able to really create a situation through your own efforts which allows you to take advantage of an unexpected turn of events. Now, another aspect that we have today is a semi-square between Mars and Chiron. And this Mars semi-square Chiron, it kind of is you're all in the same vein, really, with Mars semi-square Chiron. You just feel slightly out of place. And I think it's good that you feel slightly out of place, because if you felt that everything was fine, you felt that everything was flowing, then what could happen? Well, it would just be sort of complacent. But with Mars semi-square Chiron, you just realise that things could be better. And if something is wrong, something is being done wrong, or someone is behaving badly, then you kind of recognise this, straight away, and you feel that something just needs to be done. And if something needs to be done, you're capable of going about it in quite a sort of an independent-minded way, and you can do things differently. And I think that is the key point. Sometimes when you do something differently, it just feels awkward, and if it feels awkward, well, you just rather not do it. But sometimes being awkward is the right approach. And I talked about the moon in the Via Combuster, whether it's in late Libra or early Scorpio, as being about things happening that weren't expected, that people being sort of confused by by things just not working out. But what could be not working out? Well, it's possible that you're the thing creating chaos. You yourself can be the unexpected factor in other people's lives, and sometimes that is the right thing to do. And that goes back to Mars semi-square Chiron. You just know that something is not right. Or, if you're talking about Chiron, you might be thinking about a wound, and, something has to be done about it. And, okay, we might be thinking about the welfare of the world in general, or you seeing injustice, but it might be about your own sense of justice, how you have been treated. And, it's, Mars semi-square Chiron. Well, Chiron has just gone into Taurus quite recently, and with Chiron in Taurus, some Arians might feel a certain financial wound. Maybe you feel you've been ripped off, or you haven't been treated well financially, or just something hasn't gone entirely right, and you feel that. But at the same time, with Mars semi-square Chiron, you want to do something about it. And we've got Jupiter sextile Uranus, which could be a fortunate aspect. And so maybe you can turn the tables. Maybe you can create a situation where you're the one in control, and in the end you can benefit financially or materially from it. But you've got to be ready to do things differently. You can't just expect things to work themselves out of their own accord. Taurus. Mars is making a semi-square to Chiron. I was just talking about Mars semi-square Chiron to Aries, and why is that relevant to you? Well, it is a reminder that Chiron is moving through Taurus, and Chiron, okay, it doesn't spend too long in Taurus. I think in a couple of months it goes back into Aries. But while Chiron is in Taurus, you may feel rather different, that you've got perhaps something unique to offer, but at the same time, Chiron in your sign can be about you feeling that you haven't always been treated well, or that you've been perhaps taken advantage of, or just something happened which wasn't good, and you're still bearing that wound, and so there might be a certain resentment building up with Chiron moving through Taurus, and also feeling that you have to do something about it. And on a positive note, I think that Chiron moving through Taurus can be about you feeling that you really have to do something which is very different, that forces people to to really take note of you. I'm really thinking about it myself, because I've got Chiron, I've got Taurus rising, and I've got Mars at 0 degrees 50 Taurus. I've got Mars at 0 degrees 50 Taurus, so Chiron is now at 0 degrees 47 Taurus. So I've got Chiron getting not just in my rising sign, but also very, very close to my Mars, and the semi-square. The semi-square to Mars is just an aggravating influence, and so with Mars semi-square Chiron, you just might feel, Taurus, that you just want to do something about it, and you don't care too much about the results. Now, you have to be careful. When Taurus just tries to throw their weight around, after perhaps a period of quiescence, they're not doing much, and then Taurus feels they've got to make a fuss, they've got to get people to listen. That can be a bit clumsy, and you don't quite create the right impression. So just because you feel the need to be assertive doesn't necessarily mean that you should be assertive, at least straight away, because there's a right way of doing things and there's a wrong way. And sure, there's nothing wrong with shaking things up and just making a fuss and forcing people to take note of you, but you don't want people to think that you're just being difficult, just being stubborn and difficult, and perhaps a bit cranky, and that's just not really how you want it. And do think with Mars semi-square Chiron, what is the best way of healing your wound, if there are any wounds. And I don't think you can necessarily assume that you're going to be able to heal your wounds just by shouting about them. You have to make some effort to just consider the world around you, consider other people's sensitivities and what they can put up with. And I say this because we've got the moon starting to move into Scorpio. So if we've got the moon moving into Scorpio, that of course means we've got moon opposition Chiron. So as the moon moves into Scorpio, obviously it will be opposition Chiron Chiron in early Taurus. So that does require you to really make some effort to understand what people's basic equilibrium is. What makes them tick. It's not what you want to do, and I think many Taurians are just not going to bother, and they're just going to feel that they just have to do things their way, and regardless of the consequences. But I would suggest that you do try a bit harder to understand the social environment, and understand what other people are going through. Just because you have powerful feelings and there are things annoying you, and doesn't mean to say that other people don't have their own issues. And when the moon moves into Scorpio, it starts to make a square to Jupiter and Pluto. So yesterday, Monday, I talked about this Jupiter-Pluto opposition, and I was saying that I thought that this Jupiter-Pluto opposition was pretty important for you, Taurus. I thought that it was an opportunity to perhaps make things happen, to move beyond your comfort zone. Okay, not something you necessarily wanted to do, but I think that there was the pressure and the opportunity as well. And so the moon triggers this opposition, and it's certainly a challenge, but the moon may represent the way forward. It may represent the right approach. So if you're feeling just a little bit stuck, and that things aren't moving, and you're still very aware of the pressure, but if you're just feeling like that, then okay, your first impulse might be to see other people in a fairly negative light. They're just part of the problem. But I think that the moon, even though it is in Scorpio, and moon in Scorpio, it's not a great place for the moon, particularly the beginning of Scorpio. Despite all of that, it just might be that certain people can be helpful. They can help you understand, what it is that you need to do. And it might be unwitting. In other words, you might have people who have, no intention of helping you out. You might even regard them as being a bit of a negative, but somehow inadvertently they do help you. They don't realise they're doing it, but just their presence, or the things they say, or the provocation. Sometimes a provocation can be useful. Someone does something or says something that maybe upsets you, but it might also be a call to action. So you get that call to action. You realise that this is not good enough, and you see your disadvantage. And because you see your disadvantage, you also see what actually does need to be done, and that might be a real part of how today unfolds. And you perhaps had been sitting on something for a week or so, perhaps ever since the new moon, and you weren't sure, and now it becomes clear, and it just could be something you hear, something you're told, and suddenly you know what it is that needs to be done. Gemini. The moon starts the day in Libra, it ends the day in Scorpio. And so, today, I think for many people today is not feeling completely easy. It seems that something is changing, and you can't necessarily control this change, and you'd like things to run using the old system, the old ways of doing things. That was easier, but you're now seeing that things aren't necessarily going to work all by themselves, and I think that as the moon moves into Scorpio, you just recognize that just certain things have to be done. You don't want to do them, but there just doesn't seem to be a choice. And although that sounds, rather boring, it is necessary. I mean, you absolutely need to know what is going on, and you mustn't put yourself in a position where you're making assumptions, because this is a time where some Geminis just could get confused. You see something happening and you don't know what it means. I mean that's not necessarily good, but even worse would be if you think you do know what it means and you do know what it's all about and you feel sure of yourself, then you could be really heading for trouble because you are under the wrong impression, and as a result you could make a mistake. So don't do things too dramatically. Don't just rush into things, and remember that Mercury, your ruler, is very close to going forward, to going direct, but it's not there yet. And there are certain things that are still undecided, that are still up in the air, and if you were to move too quickly, then things could go wrong. On the other hand, we do have a sextile aspect between Jupiter and Uranus, and this Jupiter-Uranus aspect is it's kind of difficult to pin down, because it's got a theoretical side to it. What does it mean theoretically? And I think that, as I mentioned in the introduction, theoretically, Jupiter-Uranus is a fortunate aspect. I mean, it's a sextile, and sextiles tend to be good aspects. It involves Jupiter. Jupiter is the greater benefic, and Uranus represents the unexpected. And what is the unexpected? And it could be an unexpected event which works in your favour. Just something happening, something that just occurs out of the blue that really changes everything, and changes everything in a good way. Of course, there is a more sort of statistical approach. I know statistics is not quite the right word, but just looking at events that take place when Jupiter sextiles Uranus, and it's not always good. It can be a real problem. It can be tragic. But I think when we're talking about bad events taking place under the influence of a Jupiter sextile Uranus, we're talking about the world at large. We're not talking about you, the individual, particularly you, the Gemini individual. And I think that with this Jupiter sextile Uranus, you just have to think about Uranus moving through your sign. And Uranus is an unstable influence. It does upset things. It's not complacent. It kind of wants to shake things up. And I would regard Uranus moving through your sign as overall as being a positive, because you're a Gemini. Geminis like variety. You don't want to be stuck doing the same thing for the rest of your life. You need change, and Uranus is giving you that change, and it's giving you plenty of time to experience this change. Remembering that Jupiter stays in Uranus. That Uranus stays in Gemini until 2032, and then Jupiter picks up on this Uranus, and so Jupiter is a fortunate aspect. Jupiter. I'm getting mixed up here. Jupiter is in a fortunate sign, Leo. I think Leo is a good sign for Jupiter to be in, and it's making a sextile to Uranus. So this might mean that through your own intellect, you're able to understand what is going on and take advantage of it. So something happens out of the blue, and you can look at it in many different ways, and you see the advantage. And what might happen could in itself be neither good nor bad. It depends how you treat it. And so by being positive and enthusiastic, you can turn an event which could be seen as being disturbing into something that really works in your favor. And it's not just about inspiration, it is also about hard work and being prepared to really get to grips with something, and to really work with it, and not to feel that you are out of control, that this is just some random event and we'll see how it works. No, you need to make the effort to turn this thing round so that it works for you, rather than just being just something random, or indeed something that could work against you. And so it could be that you can change things round completely. It could be that something that seems difficult could actually be, Gemini, a major opportunity. Cancer. The moon is changing signs. It's changing from Libra to Scorpio. And when we think about this sign change, for many of us it seems to be a quite problematic sign change, because Moon in Scorpio, doesn't have a great reputation, but as I often tell you, every month when the moon does move into Scorpio, it's not so bad, because Cancer, this is something that you are reasonably familiar with, and the moon is moving through a water sign, and it is a time where things are sort of more emotional than usual, but it's the kind of emotion that you understand, and because you understand what's going on, you at the very least have a relative advantage. We could be in a situation that that other people do find to be really quite confusing, and they don't understand what's going on, and that might mean that they do nothing, or they just feel that they have to just watch and really look after themselves. But you Cancer, as the moon changes sign, you're feeling better about yourself. You can see new possibilities, and additionally, you might be able to look at an old problem in a new way. Okay, when I say an old problem, maybe a problem that has just been cropping up over the last few days. It doesn't have to be a super old problem, but something you thought was really insoluble. Now you can see the way through, and this relates to the fact that we do have a T-square forming, particularly by the end of the day, and particularly if you're in the Americas. Maybe you won't feel it quite so strongly if you're in other parts of the world. But what we've got is we've got Jupiter opposition Pluto, and I mentioned this yesterday, the fact that there was an exact Jupiter-Pluto opposition, but now the moon is picking up on it. So we've got the moon in early Scorpio making a square to Jupiter, making a square to Pluto. And so, if we looked at Jupiter-Pluto, we talked about the Jupiter-Pluto opposition yesterday, and I suggested, Cancer, that it might have some relevance to your finances, or it just could be something complicated, of a financial nature or of an organizational nature, just something you feel you have to deal with, something that has cropped up that you don't really want to have. You don't want to have to deal with it. You'd rather leave it alone because it just seems difficult, and you have to sort of move into difficult territory in order to make sense of it. But the moon in Scorpio gives you the capacity to understand, to really be able to go quite deeply into something, and to really go below the surface, and in the process to actually quite enjoy yourself. So that doesn't sound very enjoyable, dealing with something that is complicated and perhaps represents complicated money and perhaps complicated wording, what people have written, and perhaps we're dealing with contracts or legacies, all that kind of stuff. But once you get going, once you get your teeth into something, then I think you're going to feel it's okay. You get it. You understand, and so don't underestimate your ability, Cancer, for dealing with things which are actually quite difficult, because it might be you of all people are actually able to get to grips with it all. Now, one aspect we do have today, which is exact, is a sextile between Jupiter and Uranus. Now, this Jupiter-Uranus sextile is around for a few days, maybe even longer. So just because today is exact, it is exact today, but it doesn't mean to say that today, Tuesday, is the only day when it matters. But this Jupiter-Uranus sextile, is taking place actually on either side of the sign Cancer. So the sign before Cancer is Gemini, the sign after Cancer is Leo. So we've got Uranus in Gemini, Jupiter and Leo. So on either side of Cancer you've got Jupiter and Uranus. So you could say that the sign Cancer is on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. And so in a general sense, this just could be just an exciting time for Cancerians. A time where Cancerians are able to see the opportunities that maybe in the past they'd missed it. But you just perhaps get a feeling of excitement that something could happen. And if, for example, there's been something that had been bothering you, maybe connected with the Jupiter-Pluto opposition, it could be something else, something that you had been worrying about. This Jupiter-Uranus sextile may actually give you a feeling of relief. Maybe when you look at it again, it's just not so bad. That there is a way through. That there really is a solution, and it suddenly becomes obvious. And perhaps the solution had been around, had almost been staring you in the face, but you hadn't quite got it. But now it starts to come together, and it might well be that when the moon does move into Scorpio, that allows you to get into something, to really confront something, and in the process you see the way through, you see what you can do, and it could be that by the end of the day you're starting to feel a certain sense of reassurance and even relief. Leo, over the last few days, maybe longer, I think that many Leos have been on pretty good form. Certainly in a social sense, I think that you do have the ability to project yourself in a way that that is appreciated, and there's something about you that it's just pleasant, and people sort of like having you around. You may not fully appreciate this, but you definitely have marked social skills right now, and I think that there continues to be an opportunity to use them, even if you don't necessarily feel like it. And So, as far as, today is concerned, I think that you're going to be, pretty good at, explaining yourself, expressing what you think and feel, and I think that you're going to get a sort of a high level of, understanding, and, don't feel that you have to leave early if you don't want to leave. If you are somewhere and you might be concerned that you're overstaying your welcome, I wouldn't worry about that. There's just something about you that really is appreciated, and if you are in a situation where there are things happening, where there are possibilities, then you kind of want to be there as long as possible, because there is this sextile between Jupiter and Uranus, and this Jupiter-Uranus is I think potentially quite fortunate, and it just could be that something could just happen out of the blue that you might be able to take advantage of. Though of course you don't want to necessarily stay in one place for too long, not because that one place could become dangerous, but because there might be other opportunities. So it might be the case that over the course of the day you try to get what you can from any one situation, but if there's something else you can do, somewhere else to go to, someone else to talk to, then try to keep it going for as long as possible. And I think there will come a stage where you have had enough, but just by keeping things in a constant state of movement for as long as possible, Leo, then I think that you kind of increase the chances of being able to take advantage of something, just something happening, just out of the blue. And don't forget that we have Jupiter moving through Leo, so that means that this Jupiter-Uranus sextile is very, very linked to you, and so Uranus I think could well represent other people. It's Uranus in Gemini, and it's quite a social placement in a Leo chart, and so it might be that when you're in a situation that is there are lots of people around, that might be just the situation for you to be able to sort of really make the most of it, and maybe someone does something or says something that is unexpected, but it definitely could work for you. Now there is a change taking place today. Okay, it could be tomorrow if you're early tomorrow if you're in East Asia or Australia or New Zealand, and that change is the moon moving into Scorpio. And so when the moon moves into Scorpio, it might feel as if things are slowing down. You've taken things as far as you possibly can, but now you're kind of looking for something else, and you're not in maybe you're not in such a hurry, and you additionally you may be looking for a degree of stability. I mean, you can't be out and about sort of day after day, and sometimes you need to find that place where you are indeed completely comfortable. Now, the moon, when it moves into Scorpio, does make a square to Jupiter, and it makes a square to Pluto. And so we've got a T-square. In fact, you could say it's a grand cross, actually, because it involves Chiron. And so, that's a big change when the moon goes into Scorpio. And you may be wondering what exactly you have to do. So, yesterday, Monday, I talked about this Jupiter-Pluto opposition. And, this Jupiter-Pluto opposition, I described this Jupiter-Pluto opposition in terms of you really trying to potentially make things happen. It's about not being satisfied with second best, and perhaps having quite high expectations of other people, but also a certain wariness of other people. You want more from them, but you're not quite sure what they're going to do and what kind of impact they're going to have. And the moon in Scorpio might just resolve things, and it might be saying that if you want to sort of maximize your luck, and if you really want to make the most of something, you first of all have to make sure that your own position is as secure as is possible. Because if you're not sure of yourself, and if you don't know where you live, you don't know where you come from, you don't know what you believe in, you don't know where you're going, well, it's very difficult to see things through. So perhaps your first responsibility is, at least you regard your first responsibility once the moon moves into Scorpio, your first responsibility is to make sure that everything is secure, everything is tied down. You know who you are, you know where everything is. And once that happens, then everything else starts to come together, and you're in a position to really utilize that Jupiter-Pluto opposition. You can work hard on something, maybe even punishingly hard up to a point, and know that you're going to be okay. And once you know that you're okay, that everything at a very basic level is sorted out, then you can really push yourself, and you can maybe demand excellence and perfection up to a point. And so I think that in the end, today could actually turn out to be quite powerful. It may be slightly exhausting, but if you've got the basics sorted out, well, I don't think that much can go wrong. Virgo. Uranus is, of course, in Gemini, and it's going to be in Gemini for years. And right now, Jupiter is making a sextile to Uranus, and this Jupiter sextile Uranus, overall, I would have regarded it as being an aspect that is pretty fortunate. It allows things to happen, which we weren't necessarily expecting. It just it happens maybe out of the blue. There are perhaps surprise opportunities that we come across, or you come across. I'm not a Virgo. Surprise opportunities you come across that can really help you in terms of achieving your ambitions, moving forward. So that does look good, but you have to ask, where are these opportunities? And I don't think the opportunities are going to be found in the usual places. You might have to search elsewhere. You might have to just follow your own feelings, and perhaps to begin with do things which are sort of quite hidden, and you're quite secretive about things. And it is okay to be secretive. If you're not being noticed, then that's good. That is fortunate, because you have the chance to work things out in your own way, and then you can make some important discoveries. And so you make this perhaps some important discovery, or a discovery, okay, it might not seem important at the time, but once you sort of look at it and you think about it, then you see that it's powerful. And with Jupiter sextile Uranus, you can perhaps put your discoveries into action. You can do it in a way that is slow and persistent, and to begin with, you don't get disturbed. there's no comment. You're left to do things on your own, and that is the way it should be. So that, to my mind, is looking quite positive. And in fact, the less you have to do with other people, maybe the better. I mean, part of you perhaps does feel that this is a time when you need to be pretty sociable, but really, I think you might find, Virgo, that other people are going to just make things more complicated. You had something in front of you which is very simple. When you're working with it on your own, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. But as soon as you share it with other people, then they make suggestions, they have ideas, they have their input, and other people's input could be just worse than useless. So yeah, I think on balance, Virgo, the more independent-minded you are, the better. And when the moon moves into Scorpio, which it does at a certain stage, I think it moves into Scorpio this afternoon if you're in sort of Europe or Africa, and perhaps obviously later if you're in most of Asia, and maybe into tomorrow, if, for example, you're in New Zealand. But when the moon moves into Scorpio, this does make things more intense. And I think with moon moving into Scorpio, that indicates that there are questions you can ask which are quite subtle. You ask a lot of questions, but it's not like you're doing a lot of talking. You don't necessarily have to involve anyone. You're motivated by questions, and it could be a learning process. You feel you need to discover something, and again, you could do it in your own private way, and you don't have to tell anyone, but you are sort of motivated by the desire to make things better for yourself. The desire for self-improvement. And the moon, when it's moving through Scorpio, is making a square to Jupiter, making a square to Pluto, so there's a T-square, and I think that this T-square is about private self-improvement, doing things on your own, doing research. So maybe if you have a discovery today, and I think there could be a discovery, your first job is to find out what it's all about. In itself, the discovery might seem uncertain, might seem even a bit unimpressive, but it's only through thinking and researching that you start to realize what you've got on your hands, and then you can start to sort of move forward with it. So it does look, to my mind, Virgo, as being quite a useful day, but it's not necessarily a day that should be shared. Libra. At the moment, Libra, you might feel somewhat disconnected. I mean, I know that the moon is moving through, starts the day in Libra, in your own sign, but it's quite late in Libra, and it just could feel that you have sort of done everything, and there's nothing much that you want to do, and so there is a feeling of not being entirely involved with the world, and that might be your approach, and you might be of a view that really there's nothing that you need to do. Now, I think you would be mistaken there, because the moon might be in late Libra, but it does make a last aspect to the sun, and so we've actually got a first quarter moon. So we had a new moon in Cancer not so long ago, a week ago, and that new moon is was in an important part of your horoscope. A part of your horoscope, connected with success, achievement, the way forward, and there is then the question of, well, how exactly are you going to realize that potential? And maybe over the last week, things haven't always gone to plan, and you might be sort of drifting to a point, and then that first quarter moon happened, moon square sun, and this is a critical stage of the lunation cycle. It's about action. It's that time where you're thinking, well, what exactly do you have to do? What should you be doing? And Libra, your first inclination might be to think, oh, well, it's just too late. There's not much that you can do. I mean, after all, this last quarter moon is taking place in late degrees. I think it takes place at 27? Is it 27, something like that, or 28? It's of the sign. So, well, let me just tell you precisely where that last quarter moon was. There's no point in guessing. So this, last quarter. I mean first quarter. So this first quarter moon is at 28 degrees 43 Libra. So so right at the end of the sign. At a stage where you might just be giving up. So in spite of your own feelings and perhaps even a little bit of lethargy, you need to recognize that there is definitely something that needs to be done, and it perhaps will not wait, and it is a call for action. So really think about it. What is it? What is it? What is it that you need to do? Because you might not feel like it, but just because you don't feel like it doesn't mean you shouldn't make the effort. Especially as we've got this sextile between Jupiter and Uranus. So this Jupiter-Uranus sextile is something pretty fortunate as far as I'm concerned. It's about luck. It's about just things happening in a way that is quite unexpected. And if something unexpected happens, then you've got to be in a position to take advantage of it. I mean, you don't want to think about it too much. I mean, if you try to second guess the unexpected, then the unexpected never happens. But you have to be on the lookout, and if something is not happening, you still have to be in a position to move, because you kind of know what you need to do, Libra. I mean, you do, deep down, and that goes back to this first quarter moon. It is a call for action, and perhaps the problem is, like I was saying at the beginning of this piece on Libra, I was suggesting that you just might feel just somewhat disconnected. You don't know where you're supposed to put your energies. There doesn't seem to be an obvious place. And, just because you feel like that doesn't mean to say that really is the case. It is not the case. And I think that there are going to be moments over the course of the day when you really are able to see what needs to be done. So Libra, the general message is, just push yourself as hard as you can, within reason. You don't want to exhaust yourself. You don't want to do in your health, but there do seem to be opportunities, but just opportunities that you may not be bothered to take advantage of. Scorpio, you're quite positive at the moment. You believe that things can happen, and this is especially the case once the moon moves into Scorpio. So the moon moves into your sign this morning, if you're in the Americas this afternoon, in sort of Europe and Africa, okay, sort of later in the day in Asia, okay, and if you're in New Zealand, that might not be until early tomorrow. But the moon is moving into Scorpio, and you are feeling, I hope, quite good about yourself and what you can achieve, because I think now might well be your moment. And perhaps while Moon is in Libra, you didn't really feel like it. You didn't think there was much you could do. It was maybe slightly frustrating, or perhaps you just knew that the time wasn't right. But things are really coming together now. And when the moon moves into Scorpio, in fact, it kind of makes a grand cross, because the moon is making an opposition to Chiron, and having made that opposition to Chiron, it moves on and makes a square to Jupiter, square to Pluto. And this T-square grand cross, it's not just about today. I think that its influence, you'll feel this influence tomorrow, Wednesday, as well. So to sort of unpack some of the things going on, well, this Jupiter-Pluto opposition, which I sort of talked about yesterday on Monday, is it's a powerful aspect, and it's also quite a motivating aspect. It's trying to really push you, hopefully, making the most of what you've got, and just not being satisfied. Things really could always be better, and you have to sort of make them better. And this might mean bringing into play resources which perhaps you normally keep to yourself. I mean, that can be Scorpio. Scorpio can be quite a private sign. It doesn't want to reveal everything. And the problem with that approach is that if you're too secretive, then you keep things to yourself, then you can't maximize the opportunities that are become available to you, because you're not working at full power, and you don't want to work at full power at some level, because if you were to work at full power, if you were to show the world what you could really do, you'd be revealing too much, and that's not what Scorpio wants to do. But I think that this Jupiter-Pluto opposition is about bringing everything together, even things which are hidden, which perhaps are rooted in the past. You'd love to keep it all secret, but that might not be an option. I mean, you have an obligation, certainly to yourself, to make the most of who you are, but perhaps you've got an obligation to other people, people your family, perhaps to society at large. And now that the moon is making this T-square, moon square Jupiter, moon square Pluto, the resolution to this problem is to just be yourself. If you are yourself, nothing else, you just are yourself. And if you act according to your own personality, your own moral code, but you are completely yourself, then I think that puts you in a position of really, quite enormous power. Okay, it's not necessarily going to be easy. You may prefer to just be more low profile, but I think that you have a chance to really pack a really very powerful punch, metaphorically, of course, because you can be yourself. And then we do have also moon opposition Chiron, and moon opposition Chiron, maybe it's not part of the Grand Cross. I mean, it is part of the Grand Cross, but maybe we need to kind of see this opposition as being something separate. I mean, Chiron in Taurus, that might say something about relationships. So, Chiron is in your opposite sign, and some Scorpios, now that Chiron has moved into your opposite sign, you may feel not entirely happy about a particular relationship that it's not going away necessarily. It's just there, but it's maybe it's holding you back, or you're feeling that something is wrong, and the moon making that opposition to Chiron, just before it squares Jupiter, squares Pluto. Maybe that you're grappling with a relationship, and you're trying to understand its influence on you, and you may feel hard done by, and you may feel perhaps rather stuck. But okay, going back to the whole Grand Cross, Moon square Jupiter, Moon square Pluto is about self-improvement, and so you perhaps have to consider how other people fit in with it all, and you need to be able to sort of move forward. And Moon opposition Chiron, there are two ways of looking at it. We could see it as being a wound, feeling that a particular relationship has been holding you back. Maybe the relationship is something in the past, something distant, but it's still having an influence, and it's perhaps having an influence on the way you perceive new relationships, and that is a way it can work. But Moon opposition Chiron can also be quite sort of independent-minded. So, if you're in an existing relationship, you might take the view that you have got to be yourself, that you almost don't have a choice, and the other person might not be happy about it. You are stirring things up, but it may be the right thing to do, especially when we think of this Jupiter-Pluto opposition. You're not satisfied with second best fundamentally, and if you think that things could be better, you're not going to be able to relax. And so in the end, Scorpio, that does mean that you have to sort of push things as far as you can, and you stay optimistic. You have a vision. If you are stirring things up, it's all for a reason, and if you stay true to yourself, it will be all for the best. Sagittarius. The moon is moving into Scorpio in the end, and when the moon moves into Scorpio, it does make a square starts making a square to Jupiter, it starts making a square to Pluto, and this movement could change your attitude a bit, because Scorpio is a sign that is very different from Sagittarius. It's quite a challenging sign for the average Sagittarius. It's about perhaps looking at things in a different way, and maybe being more introspective than usual, more introspective than you would perhaps like to be. But you can't always be in the middle of things, and sometimes you just have to accept that something can't be done. At least it can't be done right this moment, and that you need to withdraw. And the moon making a square to Jupiter is kind of indicating that you might be feeling that just some things just are a little bit too much. You perhaps have been trying to think about how to respond to the world around you, how to develop the right even sort of the right moral code, the right philosophy, the right set of guiding principles, and that is not always easy. And the moon in Scorpio is perhaps asking you to just retreat and to just work it through. You can work it through in your own way, and there's no harm in using your using your feelings. Your feelings are perhaps sort of more powerful than usual, and yeah, I think that's something that you perhaps should be doing. And when you are sort of in a different world, when you are when you are in a state of retreat, that might actually be the state when you are at your most fortunate. When there could be sort of hidden realizations, hidden discoveries, and something occurs to you, and suddenly it makes sense. And things are not going to make sense if you're right in the center of things. How can they? Because just too much noise, too many people to deal with. Different arguments, different ideas, too much action. But on your own, that's when things do start to move, and perhaps this is when you're able to take advantage of this sextile between Jupiter and Uranus. So Jupiter, your ruler, sextile Uranus is an aspect that is really very inspired. It's something just occurs to you, something just happens, and I think ideally it happens in your own way, at your own pace, and suddenly it all makes sense. And when it makes sense, you kind of know you're on the right track. But Uranus is in your 7th house, at least. Gemini is the 7th house from Sagittarius, and so the 7th house, Gemini, is a sign that is often connected with other people and relationships, and it just could be that something someone does or something someone says just has a big impact on you. Even if you are trying to retreat, you're trying to do things in your own way, you can't entirely avoid the influence of other people. And now it could be that someone does something pleasant, they're generous. I mean, that is a way of looking at Jupiter sextile Uranus. It could be that you benefit from someone's unexpected generosity, and that kind of contradicts what I've just said, because I've kind of suggested, Sagittarius, that you might be better off when you're away from other people. So what I would then say is, don't completely shut out other people. There's always that possibility to benefit from the unexpected. So at the very least, make sure that lines of communication are open. But it could also be your observation of another person. You observe what someone is doing, what they're saying. They're not necessarily even talking to you, but you're just watching them, and they do something, and it has an immediate impact. And suddenly, Sagittarius, things start to make sense, and you realize that you understand something, and there's just a feeling of perhaps release, that things are going to be okay, because you have found a solution. And if you have found a solution, well, what more can you want? Now, going back to what I was saying about isolation, relative isolation, another reason why you might want to be slightly detached from the outside world, it might relate to your spiritual aspirations. You are quite tuned in at the moment. It's like with yesterday, because what I was saying yesterday was that Jupiter is square the Uranus-Neptune midpoint, and there's Uranus, there's Neptune. So the Uranus-Neptune midpoint is at 4 degrees Taurus, and Jupiter's square this. I mean, it was square this midpoint yesterday. I mean, it's still there. And I said about Jupiter on a Uranus-Neptune midpoint that it could be quite inspired, and that you might have sort of realizations, but realizations of a quite spiritual nature, almost sort of otherworldly, and you suddenly start to see things in a completely different way. And yeah, that is a good reason to be isolated, to not be in the middle of things, to not be, I don't know, driving around, for example, driving on the freeway or the motorway or the highway, you know, and instead just being somewhere quiet, because when you're quiet, that allows the inspiration to flow, and it also means that if you want to just open yourself up to the universe, you can. You don't have to worry necessarily about the material world, and you don't want to feel that you have to do anything of a material nature, particularly having to do something well, do something where, you know, you've got to be precise, where you've got to really worry about the material side of things. You don't really want that, and so you are inspired today, and perhaps you should be putting yourself in a position where those inspirations, you know, really can work, where they can sink in, where you can start to understand them, and where they can say something perhaps about your future. Capricorn, there is a first quarter moon today. So the moon is in late Libra, and it's making a square to the sun in late Cancer. And so, you know, this first quarter moon, I think, does have an impact on you. You know, this first quarter moon, it is in cardinal signs, and you are, of course, a Capricorn, which is a cardinal sign, and this first quarter moon is perhaps giving you, extra information about the new moon. So we had a new moon a week ago, and this new moon was in late Cancer. So the new moon in late Cancer is about relationships, potentially. I mean, Cancer is your opposite sign, and in the Capricorn chart, Cancer is often associated with other people and with particular relationships. And the moon had moved on. The moon moved out of Cancer, moved through Leo and Virgo, then Libra, and now it's making that first quarter moon, and this could be a time to be thinking about other people and their role in your life, and perhaps how they could be useful. There's nothing wrong with regarding people as useful. You know them for a reason, and this may particularly apply to short-term relationships rather than long-term ones. Perhaps you have been in touch with someone recently, and it hasn't necessarily been going anywhere. Why are you in touch with someone? What was the purpose? And this first quarter moon could be about when a relationship becomes useful, and useful perhaps in quite a mundane way, in terms of perhaps your ambitions or your career, or getting help from someone. So now might be the time to call in a favour, or to talk to someone and say, okay, we've had a connection with each other. You're there, I'm here. What are we going to be able to do for each other? What's the purpose of it all? So there could be quite a social dimension to this first quarter moon, but not in any way that is vague. It's just asking what you and someone else can do, and you don't want to leave it too long, because when you've got a first quarter moon, there can be a degree of urgency. This lunation cycle is now a week old. So what now? Where is it all going? And the moon having made this square to the Sun, it moves into Scorpio, and the Moon in Scorpio makes a square to Jupiter and a square to Pluto. So yesterday's Jupiter-Pluto opposition, remains in force. It remains, a very sort of powerful influence. And the Jupiter-Pluto opposition is maybe sort of encouraging you to go further, to just not be satisfied with what things look like, on the surface. And this does to an extent link with Jupiter in Leo. So Jupiter's going to be in Leo for the next year. And for Capricorn, while Jupiter moves through Leo, I think this is encouraging you to really understand things. Just not to be satisfied with surface appearances, being really prepared to go deeply into things. And I think that when the Moon moves into Scorpio, there is an encouragement here, just not to just take things at a surface level. Be ready to get to grips with things and to ask questions. And in terms of other people, just not be satisfied with things that are superficial. Ask yourself, what is everyone like? What have people got to offer? And the Moon, by the way, is making an opposition to Chiron, and this Moon opposition Chiron means that you're thinking about what is important to you. And you can certainly see how if you let other people, have their way, then your own creativity could be undermined. People may not be as interested as they should be in what you can do in terms of, what you can do that is special. And maybe, Capricorn, you have to make things just a little bit complicated and uneasy for everyone. If everything is easy, everything is straightforward, then yes, there'll be progress. But it might be the kind of progress where you might be forgotten, where your interests are not necessarily taken very seriously. So perhaps you have to kind of stir things up and just ask questions that people fundamentally don't want to answer. And that might mean making people defensive, but in the process you will be having an impact, and you'll be making sure that your own rights and your freedoms are respected. So Capricorn, I think it is a rather uneasy day, but I think it's a day that you have to be assertive, and you mustn't be afraid of things that are complicated, and you don't take what you're told at face value. I mean, people can say lots of different things right now with ease. And what they say superficially sounds absolutely reasonable. But when you actually analyze what people are saying, you'll soon realize that it is perhaps nonsense. And so, don't take what anyone says at face value, and always ask questions. Keep asking questions. It might not be what anyone wants you to do, but you by asking questions, you're in a way you are asserting yourself. Now, one other thing is that we do have a sextile between Jupiter and Uranus, and this Jupiter-Uranus sextile, I think that on a personal level, I think for us is, when I say us, I mean for everyone. I think that this Jupiter-Uranus sextile is quite a good aspect. It is about freedom. and it's about sort of breaking free from a difficult situation and perhaps even breaking free from stress. And this Jupiter-Uranus sextile has Cancer on its midpoint. So Jupiter's in Leo, Uranus is in Gemini, Cancer is a sign in the middle, but then Cancer is a sign opposition Capricorn. So in a way, the Cancer-Capricorn axis is on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. So in that way, I think that you can benefit from it, and maybe you benefit in the end through your understanding of other people. So by being quite tough with other people, not taking things at face value, that might seem to be the wrong thing to do, because you're just creating a lack of ease. You are being disruptive. But if you just are able to see it through, then in the end there might be a resolution. There might be some kind of breakthrough, and you realize that actually things are okay. And that is a feature of Jupiter sextile Uranus. As Ebertin says, it is the thank the Lord aspect. He says, he kind of implied, though, in a combination of stellar influences, that he kind of used to see it as the thank the Lord aspect, but I think it is kind of thank the Lord aspect, and there just could be, through the right interactions with other people, in the end, just a feeling that things are okay, that things are nothing like as difficult as you thought they were. And yes, there could be a feeling of relief there. So if you're in perhaps a sort of a difficult social situation, or a relationship is not necessarily going to plan, maybe in the end that Jupiter-Uranus sextile can provide some kind of fortunate breakthrough. Aquarius, we still have this Jupiter-Pluto opposition. I talked about Jupiter-Pluto opposition yesterday. I took the view, Aquarius, that this Jupiter-Pluto opposition was an important aspect. After all, Pluto is in your sign, Jupiter is in your opposite sign. It might say something about relationships and how you navigate relationships. Part of you, Aquarius, would like to, hold on to what you have, hold on to what you believe. Pluto in Aquarius, maybe wanting to be in control, but Pluto is being challenged by Jupiter. Jupiter might represent another person and what another person has to offer, and you might think you've got everything sorted out, but there are still things that you've missed, and maybe other people can provide it. And so it would be a shame if you were, for example, to be completely isolating yourself, because you might be missing an important chance. And what's happening today is that the moon is in late Libra, moving into Scorpio. And so when the moon moves into Scorpio, it makes a square to Jupiter, and it makes a square to Pluto. So what that means is that we have a T square. There's the Jupiter-Pluto opposition across the main axis of your chart, and then there's a moon in Scorpio coming in to really pick it all up. And it also is quite empowering, that moon in Scorpio. I know that moon in Scorpio has a difficult reputation, particularly moon in early Scorpio. Moon is fallen, moon is 3 degrees Scorpio is in some ways the worst degree for the moon to be at, because it is the point of its fall, 3 degrees Scorpio. But from your perspective, I think it's rather different. I think that you have an ability to think about what needs to be done, And Moon in Scorpio for you Aquarius is, I think, quite ambitious and quite intense. You intensely think about what it is that you would like to achieve, and you want to take things as far as is possible. And I think you started to feel that yesterday with Jupiter-Pluto opposition, but now with the Moon coming in, you really want to take things further, and you're not happy with something that's just good. It has to be really good. And perhaps today you have the resources that you need in order to really make a very powerful impact. And part of those resources might be human, because with Jupiter moving through Leo, it is a time, Aquarius, when you need to think about the various relationships in your life, what role other people have to play, and I think that other people can, I think, have quite a fortunate role in your life. I mean, there is a way of looking at Jupiter moving through Leo as saying that you may be able to benefit from someone's generosity. So certain people can be very good for you, and with the Moon moving through Scorpio, it might really bring this all out. Perhaps through your ambitions, through the articulation of your ambitions, you're having an impact on other people. Perhaps people are going to respond to you very well. That might be particularly noticeable, if you're working, but wherever there are people, wherever Aquarius you are trying to make things happen, wherever you try to make progress, I think that you can really sort of get things moving. So I do think that it is going to potentially be, Aquarius, quite a powerful day when you have a clear sense of where things should be going, not just in terms of yourself, but in terms of everything, in terms of the group, the community. You know what needs to be done. I mean, deep down, and so I think that overall, it can be a pretty successful day. And furthermore, I should point out that Mars is still making a sextile to Saturn, and so with Mars making a sextile to Saturn, you have a lot of energy. You really can. You can really push yourself, and you can push other people, but you can do it in a way that is not just constructive, but is light-hearted enough. I'm not saying that it's totally easygoing, but you have a certain sense of humour. You're not totally heavy-going, and because of that, I think that you can get support if necessary. And so, yeah, Aquarius, it's a day that could be very successful, but you've got to really make the most of it, and you certainly can't rest on your laurels. Pisces, the Moon is moving into Scorpio, moving out of Libra into Scorpio, and I think Moon in Scorpio is a placement which is quite motivating. I think in many respects the Moon in Scorpio is better than the Moon in Libra from a Piscean viewpoint. It just feels more comfortable. You feel sort of more at one with yourself. Yesterday, there was a lot going on, but it might have felt just a bit too logical, a bit too dry with the Moon in late Libra. And now that the Moon is in Scorpio, you're starting to perhaps be aware of possibilities. And when the Moon is in Scorpio, it as the moment it moves into Scorpio, it makes a trine to the North Node, and the North Node is still moving through Pisces, and so Moon trine North Node, there could be moments today, particularly late in the day, when you just feel a sense of oneness, that you kind of know where you're going. And perhaps there had been recent complications. You just weren't sure, and now you see it, that you can really think about your needs in a way that is just straightforward. And perhaps you've been worrying about different alternatives. I mean, you could have done this and you could have done that, and you weren't quite sure what was the right thing to do. But now with Moon trine the North Node, it is becoming clearer. And this is also happening at a time when Jupiter is opposition Pluto. So yesterday, Jupiter opposition Pluto, was the main aspect. But this Jupiter-Pluto opposition is still, in operation, and it's an aspect that allows you to really make the most of everything. And I think you are going to want to push yourself, quite hard, and perhaps it felt a bit exhausting yesterday. You didn't really want to see things through, but you kind of knew you had to, but you weren't quite sure how. But the Moon, as it starts to make a square to Jupiter, square to Pluto, this provides some answers, because the Moon is part of a T-square, and it provides that sort of dynamic tension. And perhaps the key thing is to be doing things which are in alignment with you, in alignment with your moral code, with who you are, what you are sort of in terms of your spiritual beliefs, who you are philosophically. And that might have been a concern. Could you do something that was right? And now with Moon in Scorpio trine the North Node, and also square Jupiter, square Pluto, you know what's right, and it's quite obvious. And if you know what's right, well, what is going to stop you? And additionally, I think that you're going to have perhaps a certain amount of luck. I mean, Jupiter is not just opposition Pluto, but it is sextile Uranus. And Jupiter sextile Uranus is a great aspect, at least on an individual level, and it may create perhaps some kind of happening. So something happens that really brings it all home. It brings it all home to you that you're on the right track. And it may not be a super spectacular event, but it's just something happening that you see it and it kind of makes sense. I mean, it may seem like a coincidence, but maybe it's not a coincidence. It's a sign that things are coming together, and that some of your recent worries, if you've had any recent worries, I don't want to create worries out of nothing, but if you've had recent worries, now they may increasingly be shown to be groundless. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 61, which is inner truth. So inner truth, that is, as its name sounds, it's perhaps finding the truth of the matter. This is a very balanced hexagram. You can see it's got two unbroken lines at the bottom, two unbroken lines at the top, and in the middle there is that space, and so there is that openness to the truth. And it's our truth, what we believe is right, and there's also this question about how we transmit the truth. So, just because we know how things should be, just because things make sense to us, doesn't mean to say that it makes sense to other people. So there can always be this possibility of a communication problem, but with inner truth, I think that we have a chance to be heard and to be understood. And the second line moves, and the second line, the imagery of the second line is about a crane as in a bird, and it is talking about the mother crane, and the mother crane is able to make these noises, these vocalizations, which her young can immediately hear. They hear, even however far away, they know that their mother is calling. And I Ching says, even if the crane is in the shade, even if the crane is hidden, the young, they know that their mother is calling. And this is kind of talking about the truth. So if something is true, if we are speaking the truth, then the right people will hear us. So that means that those that understand our message will be attracted to us. Of course, not everyone is going to hear our message. Not everyone is going to appreciate what we say. But perhaps that's actually a good way of judging people, of distinguishing people. There may be sort of our people, people who are on our wavelength, and there are other people who are not on our wavelength and they're not going to listen to us. So that might actually be a good way of judging people. You say what's on your mind. If people don't understand you, well, that's their problem. They were never going to understand you anyway. And yeah, they were of a sort of a different grouping, and so let them go their own way. But those that are aligned with us will certainly understand our message. And then the fifth line moves, and again, it's kind of quite similar. It's talking about sincerity. If we are sincere, then for sure people are going to listen, and we can find maybe kindred spirits. Yeah, people who are on our wavelength. But we mustn't talk too much, and there are limits to what the spoken word can do, and that is indicated by the top line. And the top line switches birds. It's not about cranes, it's about roosters. And the rooster makes a lot of noise, but the question is, does it mean anything? The rooster can make as much noise as it likes, but people are not necessarily going to listen. And we have to be careful with our words. We can say as much as we like, but there might just come a point where the words are empty, and it's just going nowhere. But we're almost trying to get to heaven through our words, and I kind of thought that was kind of interesting. And that reminded me of buying books. You go to you go to sort of an occult bookshop. Do they have occult bookshops anymore? And you find these books on. I remember when I first started buying books on the occult when I was in my teens, in sort of the late 70s. Late 70s, people were really into that stuff, and you'd buy all these books which were talking about these amazing things like astral projection and various aspects of magic, and it almost seemed that you could find spiritual enlightenment by not just by. You didn't even have to read the book; you just had to buy the book. Once you bought the book, you had access to this mystery, and someone had written it, and then you read the book, and you felt you were closer to it. But books are not going to get you to heaven. books are not going to get you to nirvana, but I think there was almost that feeling that books could get you to nirvana, and that's what I was kind of thinking and reminded of when I was reading this line of the I Ching. And so yeah, words on their own are really they have their limits. To an extent they can have an influence, but they have to be matched with something else, and perhaps that is maybe what the I Ching was implying. It's maybe it's through our actions, or our self-discipline, or what we're doing every day, having the right routines and so on. But in the end, we just might find that no one's listening to us, and we might just in the end feel quite stuck. And perhaps that is the point where we recognize we've gone far enough. And because we've got 3 moving lines in this hexagram, and so that moves to a second hexagram, which is return. So this whole process of inner truth, we do our best to have an impact, and we are successful up to a point. People do listen, people understand. Maybe we do find people who are on our wavelength, but at a certain point we recognize we've done what we can. If we keep going, we might just find ourselves just talking, and it's just hot air. And so we return, and that's what this hexagram 24 is about. We've gone a long way, we've made a lot of progress, but for the moment we can't go any further, and so we just return to where we were, and we don't seek any sort of further development in the short term. We're just happy with what we've done, and that's it. So yeah, that really is it. That's all I've got to say for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.